Alright guys, today I wanted to talk to you about something I've been seeing a lot of on Authortube. I have watched a ton of spilling the tea videos, and I worried about putting my 2 cents in because I'm a fairly new content creator for Authortube, but at the same time I've been a viewer of Authortube and a participant in Authortube for a while now. I started watching Authortube videos, golly, probably 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe not all of the popular people, but quite a few that I really love. Jenna Moresi, Joanna Penn, Sterling and Stone, Chris Fox, science fiction and fantasy marketing podcast. So many great videos for authors about author topics. And there's others that I watch as well, but those I have been watching the longest. And those are probably not the ones necessarily being referenced with some of these spilling the tea videos, but I did want to talk about what was being said in the spilling the tea videos, even though I haven't noticed it a ton. I've noticed it on a sideline kind of way, but not necessarily in your face, it's bothering me as well type way. I don't necessarily agree with some of the issues that people in these spilling the tea videos have had, and some I kind of agree with, and some I feel like there are some caveats that need to be made. So if you haven't watched any other spilling the tea videos, I recommend you go do that and see kind of what people have to say about the Authortube community and things that we can make better and things that they're kind of concerned about. So the first thing I want to talk about, and this is one that I can totally see, is that some people are feeling excluded from the Authortube community because of what they write, or how fast they write, or slow they write, or a large other number of reasons. And I definitely think we need to be a place that is inclusive to all writers. It doesn't matter your skill level. It doesn't matter if you write poetry or short stories or novels or, memoir, whatever you write, you should be able to be and feel included and welcome. And also, even if you don't write very much, a poem a year, a short story a year, if you want to be part of the community, you should be. So I do think that's important that we don't make people feel excluded. Now, the next part is kind of where I think we have to be careful. So many people, I think, are feeling excluded because of things that are being said that are true in some cases. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, that's not really true. And the thing is, sometimes it is. And one of those things is like, oh, I've heard this several times on the spilling the tea videos. Things like, oh, you don't have to write every day. And that's kind of true. You don't have to write every day. But if your goal is to be a full-time writer, making your living as a writer, you probably need to write every day or 5 days a week. I mean, you're not probably going to make, realistically, most people are not going to make a sustainable living income by writing when the muse hits. If you're a hobbyist writer, absolutely, you can write whenever you want. And you shouldn't feel pressured. Nobody should feel pressured to write every day if that's not in line with your goals. But nobody's throwing the caveat out there that needs to be out there, which is that if you are wanting to be a full-time writer, you have to do things differently than a hobbyist writer. And it's okay if you don't want to be a full-time writer. One of my really good friends, she's a writer. I have a lot of respect for her. I go hang out with her. We're definitely on 2 different writing paths though. She's a full-time mom and she writes when she can every now and then. And I still totally respect her as a writer. But at the same time, our journeys are very different. I write 4 to 5 days a week. I hold down a full-time job and I'm a mom. And I'm not better than anybody else because I do that, but I'm trying in the next couple years to go full-time so that I can go back to college. So if you're going full-time, you need to write. And it's important to not say to people, well, you don't have to do this. Okay, yeah, you probably don't, But is that part of what you're trying to do? Should you be doing that if your goal is to be a full-time writer? And a lot of the advice that people are getting up in arms about is stuff that makes sense if you want to write full-time and have it be your career. And that's a huge distinction. Are you writing as a career, or are you writing for fun to make a little extra money on the side? Because you are going to do writing so differently in those cases. And I really think that somebody needs to acknowledge that, and nobody has that I've seen in the videos. So I want to acknowledge that here is that whatever your writing goals are, make sure that what you're doing aligns with it. And if you're trying to be a full-time writer, yes, you probably need to write every day. So keep it real, keep it realistic, and be honest with yourself, and make sure that the writers and people you're following and content creators are being honest with you. It's great to feel like, oh, the pressure's off. I don't have to write every day. Okay, but if you don't write every day and your goal is to be full-time, it's going to be really hard to meet that goal. You know, nobody should be writing until they get themselves sick, but you might have to miss some sleep if you want to be a full-time writer. That's just the way it is. There's kind of two ways to make money as a writer. A, write a really, really popular book where it sells a ton, like one book that sells a ton, or write a lot of books. A lot of the writers you know who are household names: Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, Danielle Steele, Janet Ivanovich, Fern Michaels. They are prolific, Nora Roberts, they are prolific writers. They have tons and tons and tons of books. And that's probably why so many people know them. If you want to write a ton of books, you have to write all the time. You have to treat it like a job if you want it to be a job. So I don't want anybody to feel pressured, especially if that's not what you're trying to do. But I want people to make sure they're being realistic with themselves. And if they're saying, oh, I only want to write when the muse hits, you're less likely, not entirely impossible, but less likely to become a full-time writer paying all your bills with your writing money. Another issue that people have been having is the division on Authortube of self-publishers and trad publishers. Here's the thing that I think is important to remember. Number one, neither is better or worse, but they are different. So I think the advice for self-publishers is different than the advice for traditional publishers in a lot of cases. And I think in the future we're going to see a lot more hybrid creators who are doing some self-publishing and some traditional publishing. And I think that will kind of resolve some of the issues that are happening on Authortube as more and more people do a little bit of both. Neither is inherently better than the other, but they are better for certain people. There are some people who really do better with traditional publishing, and traditional publishing is more in line with their goals. If you really want your books in a bookstore, going traditional is probably the way to go. If you want the big, book signings and tours, that doesn't usually happen as an indie unless you pay for that and figure out how to do that yourself. But what you sacrifice when you go traditional, well, let me back up. One more benefit of traditional is they have so much knowledge. They've been doing this for a long time. They know the industry. They have the contacts. These are people who can get your book out there and give it the best chance it has in many cases of, being a bestseller. Nobody should think that traditional publishing is a bad thing, because these people know what they're doing. They've been doing it a long time. And I'm talking the big 5 publishing houses here. I'm not talking about the little tiny ones that come up. The benefit of those, I would say, is they know their audience, so your books will probably sell well within their audience. But what do you sacrifice with traditional publishing? Well, the big thing is control. In traditional publishing, you often don't have control over the cover. You may not have control over your blurb or the content on the back of your books that would draw people in. Also, you may not be able to write the book you want to write. You may be told, no, you need to do rewrites on this, or this book isn't going to be what we'll accept. And a big part of that is, publishing companies really, really want to sell large amounts of books. That's why they're there. They have lots of people's salaries and insurance and stockholders and stuff, people they have to answer to. As an indie author, you can take a little bit more risks. You can really write the book of your heart and put it out there, and you just have a lot more creative control. So for somebody like me, I like self-publishing. I've been doing self-publishing for 5 years. I want to at some point try traditional publishing just to kind of know and have a broader view of things. But, I've talked to different traditional published authors, like, again, at a table, not on a chat room, not on a forum, not on a Facebook group, but like face to face with different people who publish by self-publishing, traditional publishing. And, some have great experiences and love their publishers, and some have less great experiences. It's very personal, and what is right for one person may not be right for another person. If you're really entrepreneurial, you might truly enjoy self-publishing as I do. I love that I have creative control. I love I can write the stories I want to write. I don't mind the things like having to find an editor and a cover make designer and learning all the stuff that I have to learn. That for me is part of the thrill, part of the I'm doing this on my own and I love it. But again, it's a lot more work and you don't have as many resources. And for some people, that's not the right choice. If you especially don't have a lot of time to devote to self-publishing, it's hard to do well unless you're prolific. Because if you're putting out one book as a self-publisher and you don't have the funds for a lot of marketing, you didn't have the funds for a good editor and couldn't find trading, you didn't have the funds for a good book cover, these are all things that can really make it hard to self-publish. So you have to have resources, whether that is learning to do stuff yourself and do it well, paying people to do it, trading services, something has to give. You got to give time or money if you're a self-publisher. And if you don't have either of those, leave it up to the traditional publishers because they got the time, they got the money, and they know how to get things done. I'd like to see less of a divide as far as like, oh, one's better than the other. No, certain ones are better for certain people. And I think it's important that we, as viewers, understand that the person talking to us is telling us their experiences and why they think one is better for them, not necessarily that they think it's better for you. A couple of the other issues that were addressed that I have somewhat mixed feelings about is a couple people said they were uncomfortable with all the authors pushing their books on Authortube. And books and services, like it felt like they were constantly being sold to. And I can totally see that. And like, obviously if you're a content creator, don't be pushy, but I don't have a problem with content creators at the end of like a video saying, oh, by the way, I've got a class that I'm teaching, or I've got a new book out, or even doing a video that is all about your new book. Those things, and saying, hey, if you want to buy it, here's where to go. Like, nobody should feel pressured to buy your book or services, but one of the challenges of being a writer, especially if you are kind of newer to writing, is you're not making a ton of royalties, so it's helpful to have other avenues to make money. For me, that's freelancing. I do ghostwriting, and that's what I do. But other people are good at speaking. They want to do classes. They want to write nonfiction books about the writing process. Those are all valid things. I don't want anybody hard selling, and I think we need to stop that if that's what is happening. But at the same time, don't get upset when people say, hey, by the way, I'm teaching a class and you can come take it because I learned a lot about this topic. If you don't want to take it, don't take it. And if that person really feels like a hard sell, unsubscribe to their channel. But at the same time, authors got to make money too, and there are ebbs and flows in publishing. 1 month might be a really good, strong royalties month, and the next might not. It's just the business. So having an added source of income is a way to kind of help stabilize that. Another issue that I have, and I'm kind of 50-50 about this. Teaching people teaching stuff that they're not necessarily following or may not be experts on. Here's the thing. It's really hard sometimes to know what people's backgrounds are if they don't tell you. And I heard somebody say something about like, well, are they teachers? If their background's a teacher, that's the only people who should be teaching. That's not really true, I don't think. I think you can teach and not be a teacher, because a teacher just means you've had the proper amount of schooling for the world to say you're a teacher, but that doesn't mean you're any good at it. There are tons of people in life who are good teachers, but they're not necessarily educated to teach. I was a Sunday school teacher for a long time, and nobody wanted my credentials. They handed me a manual and said, here, go teach, and I taught. I didn't have to take special classes to be a Sunday school teacher, but I taught. I was a Cub Scout leader, taught Cub Scout stuff. You can teach without necessarily having teaching credentials, and I think people weren't necessarily even meaning that so much as, well, how do we know people have experience? And the answer is you don't always, but don't assume that somebody doesn't have experience either. If you are hearing advice that makes sense and sounds good, you can probably take it, at least try it, and it may work, even if that person may not have real world experience, or you may not see that real world experience. We're writers here. Some of us use pen names. Some of us have experiences that's not like in your face clear. Myself, as I said, I'm a ghostwriter, so I've written a lot of genres. There's very few things I haven't written. I've written like some copy, ad copy, I've written fantasy, I've written science fiction, pretty much across the globe I've written as a ghostwriter. But if you were to just check out my website, I'm just a romance writer. Like, I look like just a romance writer. And if you didn't know that I did these other things, you'd think, well, what experience does she have? Well, I do have other experience. You know, I've taken classes in creative writing. I'm not a teacher. I don't have a degree in that. I have a college degree in something else, not writing, but does that make me any less able to share what I know with you and what I've learned along the way? And here's the other thing too. Sometimes doing is the best way to learn. Experimenting, taking what you learn from other people. There's so many ways to learn, and I think we have to be careful about judging people by saying, well, they don't do that, so we shouldn't listen to their advice. Just because the author that you're looking at maybe didn't do something the way you think they should have done in their book doesn't mean that they're giving bad advice. They can still give good advice, and maybe that book they didn't feel like following it for whatever reason. And that's another thing too. So many things about writing are circumstantial. Like, yes, this may be a general rule of writing, but in this book we're going to break that rule for the sake of the story because it's important to the story. So I'm just asking everybody to have a little grace with everybody else. You know, nobody should feel shamed, but at the same time, people need to be honest with themselves and honest with other people and say writing is hard. Writing is hard. There's not one way to do everything. Some things are going to work for certain people. Genre makes a difference. Marketability makes a difference. So many things. Books aren't a product. I mean, they are, but they aren't. Like, if I make mac and cheese, people know what good mac and cheese is and what bad mac and cheese is. And there might be some variances of opinion, but mac and cheese is mac and cheese. Writing is so much more complicated than that. It's like walking into a restaurant with every kind of food ever made out there. And what one person likes, another person might not. And there might be groups of people that love this one kind of food, but they may not be the majority. Now, they may make up enough to make up for that, and that's what niches are. In one of my pen names, I write in a very specific niche, and it's not a super wide audience, but because it's very specific and there's not a lot of people creating content in that audience, of all my books, it sells the best to that audience. And, that doesn't make it any less valid because it's a small audience. And it's such a small audience that I couldn't have traditionally published even if I wanted to, because there's literally one publisher, I'm pretty sure, maybe two in the whole wide world that publishes this niche. So just be aware, be sensible, listen to what people say, assume good intentions in the writers on here, because we're all just trying. We all just want to help each other. We all just want to be supportive. I don't think many people, I'm going to say not anybody, but that's too broad, but very, very few people have come on Authortube trying to make videos to hurt people or to shame people. It may come off that way, and I certainly don't want to come off that way. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm, hurting their dreams or being rude. But I do want you to know that you have to make sure that you're doing things that follow the path of what you're trying to do. If that's traditional publishing, do the things that get you there. If that's self-publishing, do the things that get you there. If that's being a hobbyist writer, there is no shame in that. If that's being a career writer, you have to take the steps to get there. And I think that's what has been missing in a lot of these spilling the tea videos that I've seen, is nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that these things are, yes, they're broad complaints, but we need to be aware that saying things like, oh, you don't have to write every day to be a writer. No, you don't. But if you only write when the mood strikes you, you're probably not going to be a career writer. If you have good advice, if you're listening to somebody who maybe doesn't follow that advice, but it's still good advice, you can still take that advice without having to be like, well, that person didn't follow it in their last book, so they shouldn't give that advice. You don't know, they might have taken classes and they might be relaying information. They might have researched and studied. I do that sometimes when I teach in my writing class, my creative writing group. I will go and I will study and read stuff to present. I may not know everything hands-on. I may not have used everything hands-on, but I still study it. And if I'm studying it and relaying information, that doesn't make it any less valid or useful. I just feel like a lot of the spilling the tea videos haven't covered these points. And again, maybe I'm not the right person because I'm such a new content creator to be making this video, but I am, because I had opinions about it. And I've actually just got tired of commenting on everybody else's spilling the tea videos about the caveats here of, yes, nobody should feel compelled to write every day, but if you want to be a full-time writer, it's probably a good idea. Another thing that everybody talks about is the people who write too fast. Can you get a book out in 30 days, and should you? Not my call. If there are people making books that are good enough for their readers, not my business. And I think we all need to be aware of that. You can't say these books can't be any good because they were written in 30 days. You can't say these people obviously can't be good writers because they're churning out a book every 30 days. Now, should everybody do that? No. But if people are writing books that people want to read, why does it matter? Let them churn out a book every 30 days. You don't have to do that. But if they're satisfying their audience, who cares? And it's okay if their audience isn't the majority. If they have 1,000 people who love their work and are super fans, and they like those books that are churned out in 30 days, that's their business. That's fine. That's how they're running their business. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way. But it also doesn't mean it's not a valid way to do it. And that's what I'm not hearing said. I'm not hearing enough of the caveats of, this isn't how you have to do it, but other people can do it that way and it's still valid. And that's what I think overall Authortube needs to hear. It is still valid if the people who matter, and that is the readers, are okay with it. As long as the readers are okay with it, what the other authors on Authortube say doesn't matter. If you're earning royalties, if you've got a fan base, Those are the things that matter, not what the other authors on Authortube say. If you haven't published yet and you're happy with how your writing is going, that's fine too. Then you're just writing for yourself, and that is a beautiful thing. You are who matters. You can do it your way, but let everybody else do it their way too. Unless it is infringing on you, as far as like people stealing your stuff, or, you know, as a reader, if you're reading stuff that sucks, and, you know, that is kind of a different story. But again, that's just you and your opinion. There's a lot of books I think suck that are bestsellers. Don't know how that happens. All right, guys. Sorry this was way more longer than I expected it to be. I just had a lot of opinions to express today. So, like and subscribe are below. Open to comments. Keep it respectful, please. Thank you.